Hey everyone, hope you're doing okay. One of the things I'll say that used to irritate me from a software sense was when you have to integrate your software with maybe a third-party system is having to write code which converts or when you receive data in say JSON format and you're writing code that converts that record structure or that data in that record structure into something within your own application to work on, to do something with it. So how can I make my life easier in the process? And one of the ways that we can do this is through using RTTI, runtime type information, and classes. And so that's what we're going to be having a little bit of a look at today. So this does have some real world applications, otherwise I wouldn't be doing it. So for example, as I said before, you may be receiving real-time events from some other system, and that data is being sent to you in a JSON formatted structure. Or you may be receiving, let's say, rostering information, and you need to update another application's database or similar. Also, you could use this similar sort of structure for, or code I will say, for maintaining configuration settings. So it does have a variety of purposes. So how do we do this, or what can we do? So basically what we're going to be looking at here, I've got my little test program. We're just going to be working on the basic or boring, people and an address. So we've got that defined here, and what I've got here, so basically we'll have a person has a name and an age, address, and the address then consists of a city and a zip code. And we've got some properties here, so yep. And you can see we're going to fill that out, and then we're going to convert it to something, and then what we can do is to go from, so what we're going to do here in the first instance is to convert this object here into a JSON stream. And in the second instance, what we're going to do then is to take a JSON stream and convert that back into an object. So all of the hard work here, essentially is done in this particular unit here. And in here we've got just two functions, procedures. One will convert an object into a JSON structure, and the other will convert from a JSON structure into an object. It's not the most complete implementation yet. I mean, you could extend this to work with lists and arrays. I haven't done that part yet. So what we'll have a little sticky beak at here is the code within these two functions here, which make our life a bit easier. And secondly, we may as well actually, let's just go back to here, we'll run the program right now so I can show you what the output would be like. So here what you can see, and I'll just go back to there and I'll move this window across to here. Okay, so I've set up a person, and we have like I said, the name, the age, their address, and when we serialize that information, you may be able to see it here. Why don't we make that a little bit bigger? So we've got the active property, we have an address, the age, etc. And then what we're going to do here, and by the way, I have changed the structure here slightly, so I've got a mismatch between properties and JSON attributes. But what we've done here, we've taken this JSON structure here and put it into a person, and so after deserialization it gets displayed, and you can see the result here. So let's go and have a little look at all the hard work and where this is done and how we can go about doing this. So let's go, we're going to bring up this unit here, and why don't we also, I think that'll do for a start. So ultimately the RTTI provides us with a number of functions, method, procedures, however you want to look at it, to be able to look at the properties, get the properties, set the properties, at runtime. I believe there's a free Pascal page. We could probably try and find one. Let's have a little sticky beak and see what we find, shall we? But while that's loading, so ultimately what's going to happen here is, oh great, free Pascal. Okay, so there is actually, so the first result here was RTTI for beginners. It's from 2021, and it shows you what you can do. I haven't really seen this one here yet, but a simple exercise, set property value, email or text. So there's a good starting point, to read more about how we can use RTTI. I'm sure there'll be something on the web page on the free Pascal documentation, which I can also provide a link to. But what we are going to do here, though, is what we're going to do is for a particular class, when we are going to convert from that being the object, our person, into the JSON structure, we want to get a list of all the properties first, and having received a list of all the properties, we need to allocate space for them so we can then read them and then interact on them, or act upon them, I should say. So now in this case here, what we are going to do is to read the properties from our object into a property list. Then we're going to iterate through each one, and as we iterate through each one, what we're going to be doing is to look at the property kind, and then for each kind, what we can do then is to get the value and add that into our JSON structure. Now you might be, when you look at this code here, you can see that I'm going to be adding an integer. Here I'll be adding a string. Here I'm adding in this case here I'm adding a float in, etc. And you might be wondering why I just can't put that line there into here, or similarly, maybe down here, why I just don't put this line function, put that function call into here. And the reason why I had to do it this way is because otherwise the compiler gets a bit confused as to which function is being which method is being used, because when you look at this these methods here, and they can take different values. When I'm working upon what ultimately is a variant here, what ultimately is the variant, it doesn't know which function I'm using here. Having said that, this does make it a little bit easier if we do need to do some debugging. So once we've worked out what the kind of properties we're dealing with, we can then get its value. So let's go down to there. We can then look at that property in that object there and get its value as a result. We then add that into our JSON. Now the last case here is when we do have a class. Like in our example, we have an address which is part of a person, and if we can, let's say, access that particular subclass or sub-object, I should say, then we are going to do a recursive call here. this recursive call will then, iterate through that particular object, and we're going to start streaming out those the properties of that class into our JSON stream as well. And once we've done that for the entire list of properties, we will then just clean up the memory that we used. So this particular function here, basically is what we've just described, is the serialization process of going from an object into JSON. Now that is probably when, let's say when you may be wanting to push something up to maybe a server. You may have a case, so you can maybe consider this as a really lightweight system to be able to, if you've written your own client and a server, you want to write that person to a database, you could stream that person into a JSON, push that to your server, go from your server and do the opposite function for deserialization, and then do maybe your insert into a database. So that is that particular function here. If you now want to consider maybe the other side, and here we're talking about a server, what you're looking at now is getting a JSON stream. We're looking this is going to be just a string essentially, and what we want to do here is to having a string, we convert that into a JSON structure, and that JSON structure, we want to then push all that information received into our person being or P being an instance of a person. So what we're going to find here is that the name in this case here will be Bob, and the age is 25. So what we're going to do here now is this next function, or the procedure, whereby the information in here gets put into here. Again, like in the case where we're going from a person into a JSON structure, we want to look at, or to get information from the class about all of its properties again, and iterate through each of those. For each property in the class, what we're going to do then is to look for the corresponding value in our JSON structure, and if it doesn't find it, well, it will just continue on. But if it does find it now, what we're going to be then using is the kind information to read that value and to then ultimately set that property here. You can see here, just as another little aside here, you can see there are a few different cases for a string object. Also, what you'll find here then is a if our JSON item is a object itself, then we are going to do that call recursively again as per the other function. And when we do process, let's say, a string, what we're going to be doing is, like the name or the address, that value goes into the property within the object, and that's where that particular assignment takes place. If we go back to our code here, then once we've taken the information from here and into here, when we debug it, ultimately what we're going to be seeing are the new settings. So here, when you look at, let's say, the let's move it to there. When you look at, I've named the address field address 2, which has Melbourne as the city and 3000 for the zip code. That's why it's not updated in here, because the program, when it sees the address field, or Actually, no, when it sees the address field, it can't find the corresponding property in the JSON structure, so it just ultimately skips over that one. When we do this, we'll make it put that one line there back to normal, and put that one there back. When we build our program and we run it again, you can now see that both the active property and the city and zip code fields were updated. So it looks for the property name within the JSON structure, it finds it, it recognizes that it's an object in itself, and then does the next step, which was another function call. So what we've done here is to using just a couple of functions from the RTTI framework within Free Pascal, we are able to perform some sort of serialization and deserialization from JSON structures into objects and the other way around. Now there are a whole bunch. Let me just, if we can go into, let's go into here. There are a bunch, we'll say, of different functions that are available. And if you'd like me to, we can always have a look at some more of these other functions here to see what can and cannot be achieved. Of course, as you know, the form components ultimately within our environment here are written, are streamed out to files. You can also see here that the other, let me just go, that other fields that we haven't looked at here are like an enumeration type. We haven't looked at an array, a record, an interface. So in my particular case here, we're only really looking at integers and a float, which could be a date and a time. And by the way, in this particular case here, I should say that when we are looking at a date and a time, that I'm actually going to write that out in as a string, as an ISO 8601 format, so that when it does get written out to the particular structure, then it's something that we can easily work on rather than just using a float type number, because I find this part here easy to read as a full date and time. We've got booleans here, different string types, and a class. And then when you can bring that over to, or when you look at the type information here, you'll see that there are a swathe of different other types that the program doesn't operate with at the minute. So this could be easily extended. Now, just going back to where I said also another case where this particular code would be useful, if you were to, let's say you wanted to have your configuration settings, you could always have declare a class for your configuration settings, give them default values of course, and then what you'd be able to do is to then just convert that class into a JSON object and store that maybe string value into then just stream that out to a file. And when your program starts, you would be able to read that file as a string into a JSON structure, and then use that to load all of your settings from file. So in a sense, what we can say is that using RTTI in your own programming is that it's good for, let's say, generic programming. And again, we're looking at serialization, and it allows you or your code to work a bit more smarter, and be more flexible. So if you had to, let's say, if we have a new field in the coming to us in that stream. All we have to do is add a property into our own class, rather than having to write, let's say, more lines of code that says, okay, if I've got this field here, then update this property here. So it could be seen as being a little bit safer there. So that's what I wanted to show you today. I hope you got something out of this. And until next time, happy coding, and I'll see you then, and bye.